Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Free Kick. It has been another fantastic round of AFLW football and we are very, very excited to talk to you about everything that's happened over the weekend. My name is Willow and I am joined by Jono and Liam this week. I'm going to start with you, Jono. What did you think of the weekend's amazing football?
Oh, there's some high quality football going on and I don't think it's getting appreciated enough. There was some cracking games over the weekend. There was also some massive blowouts as well, which was kind of strange. But no, I was thrilled, particularly with that last game of the round. I feel like that Port Adelaide-Hawthorn rivalry is getting pretty good every time.
Yeah, that was a very, very exciting one and some very interesting fantasy takeaways from that one, which we will get to in due time. But for now, we're going to specifically, Liam, how was your weekend?
My weekend was very stressful, but not for AFLW reasons. I was stressing over... I must admit, it was my priority this weekend. Unlike most other weekends, my men's fantasy side, I was gunning for a top 100 spot. And so I was stressing about a lot of men's players over the weekend. Thankfully, it wasn't all for naught. I managed to finish 99th. Never speak to me about the amount of stress and anxiety for the final game of the season. For the W, though, my team was not very good. But I too enjoyed the football that was played. I thought it was very interesting. It's clear that St Kilda is more like first half St Kilda Carlton game version than the second half. It looks like GWS have at least one quarter in them to go against the really good sides in the comp. The Bombers, without Matty Gay, are going to get smashed.
Yeah. Oh, geez, that's a real sad note to finish on there. Matty Gay, that's going to be a talking point this episode for sure. I just want to say well done on the 99th place. That's huge.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a big couple of seasons in a row with W last season and then into a men's season or into a men's hat. I'm very, very happy. Doesn't look like I'm going to be doing the same in the W at this rate, given where my rank currently is. But, it's very early on. Still got 10 more rounds to go. There is still time to make everything back up.
And that is a perfect segue into our shipping report because we will be starting with our bottom-ranked coach. And Liam, unfortunately, as you said, the priority may have been the men's, and that was probably a good thing because your team's got a few problems going on at the moment.
Yeah, it really, really does. So I scored a 1650. That was a weekly rank of 8,863, and it dropped my rank back to 4,620, so about 2,500 spots. My good call, there was only one for the weekend, and that was trading in Jordy Allen for Charlotte Brewer, who was exceptional, looking like a future superstar.
Should specify this is the Melbourne Jordan Allen, not...
This is the Melbourne Jordan Allen, and we can't even differentiate it on spelling. They are spelt exactly the same. I thought that her composure at stoppage, her ability to find a pass is looking Maddie Prespakis-esque. Watching that game. That's the type of player that I thought Jordy Allen was, or at least what she looked like. And interestingly enough, Maddie Prespakis has been taking kick-ins this year, which is what Allen has also been doing. My bad call was going with Violet Patterson after I was questioning through the week about what would happen when everyone came back. Is it going to be a consistent scoring role? I was very hesitant when we recorded the on-air. However, I couldn't resist the cash and I traded her in. And that was a big mistake. My blind side was I knew that Brisbane were going to have a hard time against North Melbourne and I had Beldors and Charlie Mullins. But the blind side was Beldors being thrown to half forward in the second half for whatever reason. I cannot fathom it. It was that was a great game to watch. Brisbane really pushed North Melbourne for 3 quarters, but it's very clear that North Melbourne are too dominant. But I cannot understand why Beldors is the half forward option. So it may be that kind of forced my hand on trading her out. I knew it was going to be bad. I didn't realize it was going to be bad for that reason.
Yeah, I think a very strange decision there, and for a play that we know is so damaging through that midfield. The Violet Patterson one's a very interesting one because those rookies have caused a fair bit of anguish across the first 2 weeks. And our next in the shipping report, Jono, I think you've also got a few queries about the rookies.
Yeah, my men's season finished months ago, so I was able to put all of my focus into the women this weekend, and quite frankly, it netted me an additional 14 points on Liam. So I think worth it. I think worth every single second of that.
I'm pretty sure that came in about the last 2 minutes of that Port Adelaide.
I would say most of it came after the siren with late adjustments. I was watching that closely.
Nice.
Yeah, 1,664 for me this week. Not my best effort. It's a weekly ranking of 7,976, which slipped me down over 1,300 spots to 1,478. So a bit of work to be doing. My good call was holding on to Ella Heads. There were versions of my trades this week where I was going to be trading her out, but a very, very good score there. The bad call was, it's these rookies. I think everyone that I brought in was pretty hopeless, and to be honest, most of the trades that I was considering throughout the week were pretty hopeless. I think the only player that I looked at bringing in that went any well was Becky Webster. So I've definitely got to reconsider what I'm looking at in terms of my targets. My blind side, though, is Ailey Runnels. My point of difference, I think, in the midfield was not fielding a rookie, but fielding Ailey Runnels for a 39 was just so much lower a floor score than I thought was possible. What Collingwood are doing with their midfield, I'm going to have to pay a lot closer attention. Bree Daving returning, Carly Ramos came back in favour. I think that was a real surprise to me. So, that really took me by surprise.
Yeah, those Collingwood players are very, very hard to pick at the moment, and it's making for a bit of a difficulty in picking our teams at the moment. Next, we have Mel, who scored a very respectable 1,695 for a weekly rank of 5,964, which puts them a little further back, but only a little bit compared to you two, in 3,863rd. Mel has put NA for her good call this week, so I guess that's a pretty good summary of how Mel thinks her team is going. And the bad call was trading out Sarah Verrier. That one came a little bit out of nowhere to score a very, very solid score. Sarah Verrier, I reckon that one probably goes as the blind side as well, if I'm completely honest.
Turns out that matchup, that Pies matchup, is exceptionally juicy because it was very, very good for a lot of the Fremantle defenders. I think Emma O'Driscoll also had a very nice score. And then looking at the gap between the Pies defenders this week, say Jono and Montana Belton, versus what happened last week against Collingwood, I think that is it's going to be a matchup to target this season.
For sure. And then leading all comers is my team, Lenina Effect. I was very happy with my score this week, a 1,750 to really be the only one who actually went up in rank this week. My weekly rank of 2,533 was enough to put me up 352 places into 1,157th to just pip Jono, who was very close to the top 100 last week. My good call of the week was not necessarily a great call because it was fixing an error from round one, but it was bringing in Claudia Whitford for Ella Roberts. They scored the exact same score, but I managed to basically get about 200k from it. So I'm pretty happy with that overall. My bad call, like pretty much everyone, was how I dealt with my rookies. I brought in Amelia Yasser, who looked really solid against Collingwood and came straight on field for a 27. So that was wonderful. And my blind side was one that I think a lot of people would have copped as well, which was Charlie Thomas being laid out thanks to illness. So a lot of people would have probably been fielding an extra defensive rookie this week, which probably affected quite a few scores. So I reckon quite a few of the people who did well this week probably didn't have Charlie Thomas in their team. And we'll finish up the shipping report with our results may vary a team, which, I mean, the results, they do be varying. A score of 1644, so marginally behind Liam, and a lot of that was thanks to the good call of keeping Sarah Verrier, to be completely honest. A weekly rank of 9,204 to have them sitting at 5,277.
Let it be known as well that Sarah Verrier was only retained because Lucy Cronin was injured, and so it was like, this feels like a bit too much. And look, I'm being honest. I'm not reacting to very late changes like Charlie Thomas out in that team. So It was thank you, Lucy Cronin. Actually, that was the good call, or at least the benefit that meant that Sarah Very was held and who had an elite score.
Absolutely. With that, we will now head to the Watch and Wait scoreboard, and we've got Liam hosting that segment for the second week running. Liam, take us away.
Yeah, this is disappointing areas for me.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I did it almost every week last year. So you know what? I'm happy to not.
We just need to wait for Willow's captain to fall apart one week, and then normal transitioning will return.
It's usually rounds 3 or 4. We're getting close. But Liam, take us away.
So, top coach and score for the week was Elves Tigers and their coach Tim, who scored an 1881. The top coach, at the moment is Elves Tigers. Top week score was Graceful and Sally's team, who scored a 1955, which is 300 points more than me, which makes me feel absolutely delightful. To keep pace with the top 100, you needed a score of 1779. Which is notably 100 points fewer than last week, which really does speak to the impact of high rookie variance. The difference between, Amelia Yasir last week to her 27 this week being a very key example. Now, for the free kick league, Walshy's 6s and 7s with James's side sits first and is 5th overall. Had a 1927 this week. 23 of the top 100 are in the free kick league this week, which is up 2 from last round.
Very nice. That is our Watch and Wait scoreboard. So now we're going to get into the hot topics, and we've got some interesting things to talk about, but the first one is quite a general one, and that's what's the vibe of fantasy in 2026? What have we learnt so far? And a lot of that comes down to the way teams are scoring. So I might throw to you, Jono, because I know this is something you're very passionate about. Average points in terms of fantasy are up, generally speaking.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good point. 2 games is a very small sample size, but I think the game is so impressive. We talked about it right at the top that the product's getting so much better, and I think there's some pretty clear numbers just to show how, I suppose, the handling of the ball has improved from last year, which was already a big step up from the year before. Contested possessions and stoppage numbers are pretty much even year on year at the moment. But uncontested possession numbers are up by 17, marks are up by 9 on average. Tackles are actually down because, the ball's more on the outside. And also scoring is up in terms of goals and behinds by about 5 points per game as well. So I think we're seeing the ball move around the ground a lot faster. Meter gains is also up pretty notably, though I don't have the number in front of me. It seems like a very much outside game growth this year.
I wonder how much that is impacted by having played now multiple games on what are considered like more premium grounds. So we've had games at Marvel Stadium, we had game at the SCG, we've obviously had one of the fixtures at GMHBA, which is a standard fixture for Geelong, but obviously Geelong having played a game at Marvel and then GMHBA, North Melbourne having played at Marvel. I wonder if that is ultimately having an impact in some of these outside numbers in better conditions alongside a larger ground means that, more of the game is going to spend time on outside. The question I have, and I don't have an answer, and it's not to cut across anything that John just said, is do we revert back to the mean, or is this an expanding game, the expanding way that the AFLW is going to be played?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think it definitely could be a bit of both. We've seen a lot of teams trying to embrace that style of football, whether it is because they are playing on grounds that are better for it. Who knows? But there are a few teams that are playing with interesting game styles. We've talked at length about how Port Adelaide are playing, but there's a few other teams, particularly in the lower end of things, that are quite interesting. You've highlighted a couple as well, Jono.
Yeah, I think the big one to me is teams like Richmond and Collingwood. We've seen that the disposal counts are up for a lot of teams this year. Richmond, absolutely the opposite way. They have plummeted down. They're having very low disposal count, lowest in league at the moment, followed by Collingwood. I mean, when we talk about Collingwood, I think they're just struggling to hold on to the football, but Richmond is playing an incredibly direct game style. And so I think this is going to be an issue for players like Sierra Greaves, Amelia Yasir, because they are their midfield, and the ball is just going, straight down the middle as fast as possible.
Yeah, and this is something that I know we've talked about privately particularly Sierra Greaves, where good player and they do know how to get the ball, but it kind of seems to just be get ball in hands, whether from a handball or out wide, and then just move it on. There's not a whole lot of marks. There's not a whole lot of tackles, and it doesn't lend itself to huge possession numbers necessarily, which could be a bit of an issue.
And I would say as well, Sierra Greaves is being asked to play the extractor role, and to some degree, Millsy Yasir was trying to do the same. And they both struggled against the Western Bulldogs. I think the problem there as well is it's Moncon who is being the meters gained player. Sierra Greaves, I think it's now, let's ask questions maybe a few weeks. I have material questions about the quality of her kicking, both in decision-making and precision. And Millsy Yasir is not a particularly big inside player and is kind of getting bodied off it. Those factors all combining mean that I am concerned for the time being for what their midfield structure looks like without Ellie McKenzie. And then when you look at Collingwood, I think it's the high rotation of players running through lots of different positions that is going to make it a very difficult team to assess until there's a quietening down. Like they had so many new recruits come through. They've had so much change week to week in their team, in players named, and then also roles played. Until that settles down, it may as well be like a new coaching regime. There's been that much turnover in the number of players on the ground.
Yeah, and Collingwood's a really interesting one because it does lead to our sort of next question, I guess, which is what does it sort of mean for the players that we're looking to target? Are we going to be looking to bring in players based on how they're going against certain oppositions? Liam, you've already brought up that Collingwood, for example, was really, really nice for defenders, so that's clearly a positive matchup. Is that something that you're going to be looking at, picking players for matchups?
It will become an increasingly important thing. I'd say that you have maybe a couple more fix-up trades to do this week. And then depending on injuries, you may be making kind of one upgrade to a premium. And in general, where possible, you like to target the combination of great player, elite matchup as your upgrade for the week to kind of bank the fact that you'll get the advantage of having this player and then they will increase in price, for example. So it will become increasingly relevant. It also is a bit of it's an exercise in looking backwards too. So when we see Violet Patterson score really, really well, or we see Montana Berylson score really, really well, players that all of us traded in to some degree, do we then need to back out and go, okay, maybe that was as a result of the matchup, not because of an innate scoring capability?
Yeah. I really hope that, I suppose, those fixtures kind of become more apparent as we go on, because I feel like early on we don't have a lot of data. So that, I'm hoping, becomes a lot easier over the coming weeks. The other one that I'm looking at is, because we've got these bigger squads on field, I feel like it's really changing how I'm looking at my own squad. I feel like last year, I was so comfortable with a lot of players, and it was really only a couple positions on field that I was worried about. But now that we've got these much bigger squads, I feel like I'm copying a lot more floor scores across the squad. And I suppose it's making me think, is my objective when getting players in just to find someone that's going to be consistent? Or am I really still targeting these ceilings because there's going to be that many flop scores? Because some of them just come out of nowhere. We're going to talk about Serene Watson and her 29 soon. I feel like a lot of these are hard to predict. And then, maybe I just want the high scores when I'm trading someone in just to be able to cancel these things out.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you make because, a player that I've got in my squad is Anne Hatchard, who scored a 76 and an 83. So nothing hugely exciting, lost a bit of money, but at this stage, that is such a low priority to trade out because I'll take a 76 and an 83 considering, as you say, Jono, you've got players like, probably far less owned, but Isabel Pritchard is a great example. A 48 in the first round and then goes massive with 145 this week. If you're picking players like that, Serene Watson is another great example. You probably do want to try and minimize those floor scores. And it's part of the reason why the rookie game's been so difficult as well. We saw Violet Patterson go 100 and then score a 30. We saw Amelia Yasir was a very common one. I think that trying to minimize those sort of sub 50 scores wherever possible is going to be something really important to try to do across these early rounds. Whether you manage to do it is a whole different kettle of fish.
And I think we're now getting to the point where the kind of, let's say like 800, 900k plus players who maybe have had a slower start are going to become trade-in priorities. So don't get too overreactive on trying to trade out what feels like the worst player in your side, like I did last week with Lily Quigley, who ended up actually having an elite score last week in better conditions, and saying, I can't overtrade in the bottom 5 to 6 players in my side. I need to target players who will be in my top 10 scorers each week. So, and Hatchard, maybe not a priority trade out this week, but next week, that's a stepping stone to a 100 plus scoring player. So it's going to be, yes, we want to try and limit the downside risk, but also not overreact to the fluctuations, because at the end of the day, given the size of the squad and the volume of trades that we have, there are still going to be high variance players, in all likelihood, in our side by the time we get to rounds 10, 11, 12. Live with those punches and trade for the highest possible score. Trade for the premiums. Trade for those either sub 1 million who have 100 average in them, or the slightly falling Uber premium who can go 115 and above.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a really good way we can move into our next segment, which is our Believe It or Not segment. And I think this comes on the back of what you've said, Liam. There's been a lot of players that haven't quite performed. They've also got quite a few injuries. Maddie Gay, very popular player, is going to at least miss a week. We saw Charlie Thomas and Lucy Cronin miss this week, Ellie Blackburn as well. And the pivots for those players have varied greatly. And I think that's somewhere that people have separated out a little bit in terms of their scores and rankings in the last fortnight. So I guess we're going to highlight a few players in multiple lines just to see whether we think that the way they are scoring is indicative of how they will go for the rest of the season, or whether it's a bit of an anomaly. And one that we will start with is one we've already talked very briefly about, and that's Serene Watson. I mean, that 29 was not ideal.
Yeah, far below what you'd be hoping for if you'd started with her. But this is becoming a bit of a yearly occurrence, because I remember last year at the start of the season, first round I think it was, when she popped that 30. Terrible for coaches. But from that point forward, one of the most reliable premiums we had in defence for the rest of the year. So I suppose my first thought is, if you've already got her, I would not be trading. The real big question for me is whether or not the rest of us who have players like a Maddie Gay, or if, let's say, Cronin and Thomas don't return and we need to trade, multiple players, should we be targeting Serene Watson?
St Kilda were really bad.
Really bad.
Yeah.
The worst that we have seen them in 3 seasons.
Yeah, I was at that game, and they just... If it wasn't for T. Smith, they may not have scored. She was so far and away their best player. It was incredible to see just how much they struggled to get their hands on the ball. Like, even when Geelong was getting it so frequently into the forward line, they seemed to have almost no way to rebound, partly because Serene Watson wasn't getting her hands on the ball. So, I mean, it speaks to one of the players that we've also highlighted, which is Becky Webster, who I think looks pretty legit. But yeah, St Kilda, I'm not racing to get Serene Watson at this stage, to be completely honest.
Alternatively, I think there's a case to be made that she is as good at centre-half back as there is in the competition, and as good a central conductor in defence as there is in the competition. And Jamie Lambert, I think it feels like a fait accompli that Choppy will return to the midfield and relinquish some of the ball movement, because this is the thing with St Kilda, is that their stoppage control and structure at the moment is so dreadful, particularly around the grounds. Like, they cannot stop clearances. Speaking of Becky Webster is the perfect example. At no point was Geelong forced to change their route one option, which was, we're going to extract it, get it to a runner, no matter who it was. It was Bowen, if it was Webster, if it was Georgie Prasparkas. And we have a route one straight down the forward line. And if St Kilda are defending Bahawley, Jackie Parry is unopposed out the back. If it's slightly higher up the ground, Aisling Maloney, she'll be able to take a mark, turn around, go. Rachel Kearns or another forward turning back around is going to beat her direct opponent. until that, but like I think that Geelong and Webster are going to be forced to change from that Route 1 plan, but St Kilda aren't going to rest with the same game plan this week. What won them last year was being able to control the ball later in the year with Serene as the central conductor and very good lateral hands to generate space. They don't have it at the moment. I see them needing to revert. And so I suspect that will be how they do it.
Sounds like a good thing for St Kilda if they do manage to change that. Just quickly on Becky Webster, as you say, they basically had one plan, which was Michaela Bowen got on the outside and either handballed or kicked it straight to Rebecca Webster, who then set it up from there. It was fantastic. One player that I think we should definitely talk about is Zippy Fish. We were very worried about her to start the season given her knee strapping and low time on ground in the Australia versus Ireland game. However, has come out and scored a 98 and 111 to start the season. Is she a player that you have to bring in now or miss out because she's just going to increase in price? Is this something we believe?
I don't think she's a player that you have to bring in, but geez, I think I'm almost certainly going to, because from Maddie Gay going up, Zippy Fish is looking fantastic. She doesn't look hampered at all. She looks incredibly consistent. I think she suits exactly what the Swans are trying to do, and they're playing incredibly well. Like I think that win over Adelaide was really just showing the way that they can get on top of the good teams, even if Adelaide aren't what they used to be. And quite frankly, I think they're going to control a lot of the football this season. I think I see no downside. I like the worst case scenario to me is that the ball spends more time in that back line. So I'm pretty confident with Zippy Fish.
The advantage with Zippy as well is that there is no one else to play her role. So even if it's like, oh, they might experiment with other positions, I think it's becoming clear now that there is no one that is going to take her place. So it's not going to be if like if you've seen in previous seasons, someone's really good at moving the ball forward. Maybe they put her at half forward to be a link inside 50. No, she is set up to do everything back there, and they have to play to some degree an element of ball control in the midfield, because Sydney's biggest weakness, I'd say, is their key defensive depth. A way to insulate that is to play ball control, to give those key defenders the ability to set up in one-on-one or in zone. And I think that that's now been successful for Sydney. So I think they're going to continue to stick with it, short of something pretty spectacular happening.
Sticking with Sydney, we'll now move into the midfield, and a player who has done very well early days this season is Sophia Hurley, who's priced at just under $1 million of your salary cap, but has scored a 92 and 117. Is that a tempter for either of you two?
Oh, it's tricky for me because I really feel like the only area they do have a lot of players is that midfield. And as I love Sophia Hurley, I think she's going to be such a great player. But surely we can't have expectations of Gardner scoring 122 and Hurley putting up big numbers every game. I think at some point the scores are going to have to drop off, particularly with Montana Ham kind of starting the season a bit more quiet. I think at some point she kind of comes back in with some bigger scores, and I don't know. I just don't think that they're sort of the North Melbourne level of dominance where you can have two premiums. I think someone's going to have to drop back. That's my main concern here. But geez, she started the season very, very well.
And speaking of two premiums in one team, another player who has really taken to a more inside midfield role is Maddie Newman at Adelaide, a 90 and an 106. Ebony Marinoff is firmly entrenched in very, very many squads, but Maddie Newman has just been putting up good numbers, and one of Mel's good season starting picks to say that. At only 890k, is this potentially, a value pick at this stage as one of those stepping stone players?
It's tough because I think the matchup against West Coast this week could be a 130. We just saw what a very, very young Gold Coast side did for I'd say a majority of their team is, if you talk about like a pure inside mid, is a first level player. The inside, outside, Laura Gardner's of the world are second level players. Most of Gold Coast is tertiary, fully outside midfielders, and they crushed. Lily Quigley scored well. think about what Maddie Newman might do as a top 3 to 4 wing in the competition if afforded that kind of space and time on the wing. Unfortunately, after that, though, it's Hawthorn, Geelong and Brisbane as the 3 matchups after it, which I think is a pretty much a murderer's row. So I don't know if she is the best target, even if this week's matchup is elite.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of West Coast, Ella Roberts, we talked a bit about her last week. Big tag from Grace Koch, a bit of a tag from Lucy Single against Gold Coast, but not a huge amount. Scored an 86, which is fine, but I think a lot of teams have kind of figured out that if you stop Ella Roberts, you stop West Coast. She's lost a fair bit of money. Is this a major concern, or do we think she'll still bounce back?
Yeah, I think she'll bounce back. The question is, you can probably wait another week just to get the break-even game, a little bit more in your favour. She and Laura Gardner are the 2 players that I'm eyeing off as the players dropping off in cash, who I think I'm probably more keen to jump on a Laura Gardner this week just for, I suppose, the fact that I think she's more likely to start putting up some higher scores again than Ella Roberts is in the short term, and she's more likely to start bouncing back up and become unaffordable. But yeah, Ella Roberts to me is, particularly if West Coast continue to be this bad, because they have not started the season well at all. I think it gets to a point where you're not even going to need to tag Roberts to be winning this comfortably. And if that's the case, maybe Roberts starts putting up good scores again. We don't have to worry about the tag as much.
I don't think it was the tag this week that affected Ella Roberts too much. That when the tag was strongest was when Roberts was scoring best. It's the skills at West Coast. They're so bad. They're not hitting targets. They certainly missed. So let's, a player we didn't talk about in the defence was Emma Swanson, who had an incredible score on the weekend. I haven't got it up in front of me, but
I think it was 122.
A dreadful game. One of the worst ball usage before. Could not control the ball movement. Was vital to score. Was vital to. You basically touched the ball every time the ball was in defence, but they kept getting killed trying to get the ball out of defence. I don't know what Daisy Pearce is cooking up to fix it, but it was not working, and something pretty drastic needs to change. I just can't imagine it being Ella Roberts who gets hurt by it. I think I saw enough to suggest that she will be able to go back to that 100 plus level. If you're an owner like me who held and was disappointed by the score, but ultimately it was better than I was worried might happen with Single. Yeah, I don't necessarily think she needs to be traded out. If she's the only platform you have to Gardner or Riddell, who are or Bowers, maybe that's your trade option. But I see her as having that 100 plus potential again versus Hatchard, who I think is just going to be what she is right now.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about Roberts. I think if you're going to trade her out, you probably need to do it last week like I did before the money kept dropping. If you're persisting with her now, you're probably just going to have to persist. A couple of other players that we will talk about in that midfield that have had a very good start to the year. Liv Purcell was a little bit underpriced, but wasn't the cheapest option, but couple of very, very good scores, 114, 113. And Maddie Prespakis, who was talked up big in the preseason as being in excellent shape, scored a 95 and a 108. Are these players that we should be targeting in the same mould as Maddie Newman, or has that ship sailed?
I think that Maddie Prespakis at nearly 100k cheaper is a very good option to target. She has played Brisbane and Sydney, who are considered 2 difficult matchups, and has scored 95 and 108. Was already taking kick-ins before Maddie Gay was injured. And so I think she will be continued to be, highlighted there. Now goes into a run of Richmond, Geelong, a bit more difficult, Fremantle, Gold Coast, West Coast over the next 5 weeks. I think that if you are in the position of needing to restructure, but you can't get up to that 1 million plus, 962 for Maddie Prespakis, who is looking like she was already back to 95, which was what I kind of thought might happen with a bit of rejuvenated form and fitness. With Maddie Gay out, I feel like she could be 100 plus.
The two Madisons, Newman and Prasparkas, are two players that I'm certainly hoping to be able to trade in next week for someone like a Hatchard if we don't have a slew of injuries again. We'll probably move on from the midfield, but there is one other player that I do want to talk about, because this is a player that I know both of you two have, and wasn't diabolical, but a 75 to Ash Woodland looked to cop a bit of attention from Hawthorn. Is that a concern?
Yeah, I think the Hawks were coming off a game where we were called out and punished for not really trying to limit the superstars. So your Kate Hawes and your Tyler Hanks, they ran amok in round one against the Hawks. So the Hawks were paying additional attention to that, and Woodland definitely copped the brunt. Having said that, I don't think 75 is a disaster for a tagged game, which won't happen that often this year. And the 100 before it shows that, when she's not being tagged, I think she's going to be a handy scorer. I think it's one to monitor, but not something I'm trading out.
So GWS this week was not the best player for Port Adelaide. It was probably Abby Dowrick, who was afforded a little bit more space than Woodland. Who does Grace Kosh go to after? It was Kosh who ran 100% of the time basically with Kate Hall.
My pitch is that they run a double team tag on Matilda Schultz, who is by far and away the most damaging player at the Power.
I love that suggestion.
Grace Kosh is one of the few players who could potentially do that.
Which wouldn't be good for the Matilda Shoals owners, myself among them. So that's a great time now for us to move towards the Rucks, and we're gonna start with a couple of premium option. One who has absolutely started to start the season in Lucy Wales, 119 and 123. Huge scores to start. And the second one is Ellie Morfitt. 2 scores in the 90s, but that much cheaper option if you did decide to not start with one of the big rucks. Are we convinced that those two are just going to continue to score well?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Excellent.
I can't imagine anyone is really looking in the ruck department at the moment, because aside from the rookies, every ruck is absolutely smashing it. I mean, we saw Wales go 123. We saw Schultz go over 120. We saw Strong go 132 this week. Everyone is crushing it. Even Darcy Davies put up an 89.
Huge. And that's one that we have put there, which is a 34 first week, but an 89 this week. Is that just a product of playing West Coast?
Yes, it is. But reminder, Lucy Wales has Collingwood this week, who just allowed Schultz to go Strom to go 130. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think, built off like a 60-point second or third quarter. I must admit, I can't remember exactly which one. It's a byproduct of watching a lot of being very focused on 2 sets of games for the entire weekend. Yeah, geez, if you picked Lucy Wales, like the results may vary, free kick team did. I was surprised we got rid of Matilda Schultz, but Lucy Wales is crushing it and could go 130 this week.
Yeah, I think Schultz was off getting some work done halfway through that last quarter, and I think Wales put on 30 points in 4 minutes. It was nuts what she was able to do without a direct opponent of Schultz's quality.
Sticking with Hawthorn, we're going to move into the forward line now, and I'm going to throw this one to you, Jono. Anya McDonough and Jack Depay have both put up some pretty good scores over the first 2 weeks. A 91 and a 75 for McDonough, and a 75 and an 80 for Jack Depay. Both pretty reasonably priced, especially Jack Depay, but I think most importantly, they do come up against Collingwood this week, which could be a bit of a bloodbath. Are they players to target this week if you aren't having to sort out an entire backline's worth of injuries?
I would say so. I think they're forming a pretty incredible duo, and particularly with all the other Hawks that got dangerous this week, like a Poppy Stockwell. I think it's becoming a very dangerous forward line, and they're becoming difficult matchups. So McDonough's always been a superstar, but last year she was getting double teamed basically, and was having to fight through that. Depay is coming in, taking some big contested marks, and I think it's really opening up the forward line for the Hawks. I think they're both well underpriced for what they could do. And I really think that what they're doing is pretty sustainable. If they can do it against Melbourne and then against the Port Power, who I think both those teams are going to be finalists this year, is my guess. So I really think there's a decent chance that they're going to be able to do this pretty consistently.
Sounds good to me. And another one in the forward line, I'm definitely going to throw this one to Liam, because Ronnie Fitzpatrick went from a 48 in the first week to a massive 132. Ronnie was everywhere against the Crows. What do we believe?
Oh, I fully believe that the 138 is closer to what Ronnie is going to do this year. Watching that opening game on the Sunday was like 30 almost points for Aaron Fitzpatrick. Like just a ball like bouncing right in front of her, or a kick where she has a million miles of space just going out of her reach and tumbling forward. I think that, yeah, if I have the cash, that 50 extra K on your McDonough to a Ron Fitzpatrick, I'm going Ronnie. I trust it more. She's just going to be in more areas more frequently. There are going to be more, I would say, more down games for McDonough and Depay than there will be running. As much as Ron Fitzpatrick has the comfortably lowest floor score of the three of them right now.
For sure. And we will go for a player last to end this segment, which is a bit cheaper thanks to a few lower scores, but a very, very promising, talented player is Lucia Painter over at the Eagles. A 51 to start, but a 79 last game. Jono, I know you're a big Lucia Painter fan. What do you think in terms of this as an option for a fair bit cheaper than those other three?
Yeah, so this is one I just wanted to mention because I think the role is really interesting. Obviously, a lot of things are going very wrong at the West Coast right now, but something that has started this season is Lucia Painter playing pretty heavy midfield minutes. She's someone we considered throughout the preseason, and I don't think a lot of people ended up going with, but I just feel like this is one that could really explode. A second-year player, a lot of them break out. The real question, I suppose, is how much are the Eagles going to change up what is happening in their midfield? Because right now it is a bit of a disaster. So the question is, do they move Ella Roberts completely out of there if she's getting tagged so that they can run some more traditional things? Or do they start to go back to some of their old stalwarts like an Emma Swanson? There's a lot to go on. I wouldn't be taking this necessarily. But if you've just decided, I don't want anything to do with the Skeppers, the Sears, and some of these cheaper forwards, and you've just decided you want to take one up with sort of a restructure this week, this is a slightly more affordable option that you could take a punt on.
I think the big problem is that the best football we've seen from the last 18 months at West Coast was a little bit of midfield time for Lucia Painter, a lot of time inside forward 50. At the moment, they cannot hold that ball in there. Very, very poor. And I think that's partly because they've robbed twice from their midfield and ruck line, from their forward line to play in the midfield and the ruck. So they've taken Wackfer, Riggs, and Painter, all from a very effective forward line in the back half of last year, and they're now not there, and it's a real struggle for West Coast to hold the ball in, and that's affecting their ball movement higher up the ground. They can't retain it. I'd be very wary of making the trade this week. I agree, it's 100% a watch because the role right now is good, but it's a lever that I can absolutely see being pulled to put Lucia Painter back in forward 50.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing that gave me pause for thought, I suppose, was that clearly they got done in the first half, and then the Eagles made some changes to adjust to it, and it was in the back half that I think Painter put up a 55-point second half. So it's just something that I want to look at. I don't know the role to me didn't seem that different. Maybe it was just some of the pieces moving around her. Maybe it was the fact that the game was effectively done and dusted. It could have been anything. It's just something I think worth monitoring.
Speaking of monitoring, we will now move into our next segment, and this is going to be a very fascinating one because I reckon a fair chunk of listener questions have come in this area, and this is about the rookies, and the rookies we can trust. And in our run sheet, trust is in inverted commas because at the moment, there aren't many we can trust. So to start off with, who are the rookies that we can play on field? Most people at this stage are probably playing at least 2, maybe 3 across a variety of lines. So I guess who are the ones that we are happiest to field? I'm going to start with you, Liam, in the defender category, because in our run sheet, we also have next to defenders 3 question marks.
Yes, I would say just about the only rookie defender I trust is Aoife Healy.
Yeah.
Which is a miss. It's a miss from us. It was one that had a little bit of hype in the preseason. I think it was, I can't remember who it was doing commentary or special. It had gotten, but it's asked for comment at the Australia-Ireland game, Cora Staunton, that's who it was, said that Aoife Healy was the new Irish player that was going to have the biggest impact this season. Currently averaging a 57.5, playing well, athletic. I think that is one of the few rookies that can be trusted at the moment in defence.
I agree with you. I think she's the best option we have. I'll also note that she just played Collingwood, and if we're looking backward to look forward, I don't trust that at all.
But in fairness, had scored all right the week before. 52 against
had indeed.
Port. So it's fine, true. But I hear you. Let's not overrate it. Very good reminder.
Yeah. And I do think that it's one of the biggest problems with our defensive rookies at the moment. A lot of them are scoring well one week and less so the next week. Molly O'Hare's one that we've talked a bit about, scored a very solid 60. Violet Patterson scored 100 and then scored a 30 this week and is now currently, as of the time of recording, suspended for the next week. So it's a difficult one. Evie Coucher scored a 50, then a 30. Zoe Wackford's sitting 30, then a 40. It's quite a difficult one. So I think it's probably an area that I'd be looking to move rookies off field as soon as possible, but I think that's going to be quite difficult because they're not making a huge amount of money based on the floor scores. But we do have a few rookies in the midfield that we can trust, and I think there's been a very clear one to start, which is, Jono, your new favourite player in Chloe.
Chloe Bound.
Bound to get it right.
Yeah. Was bound to happen.
Very good. But yes, Chloe Bound, 270s, seems like pretty clearly the most consistent option though. Liam, your good call of the week seems to be probably the next best option.
Averaging more than Chloe Bound, but I think probably going to be a little bit more inconsistent. It'll be fascinating to see if she can hold up that scoring. It's 95. Incredible stuff against Carlton. I don't know how that scoring is going to look. Sorry, not against GWS.
So incredible it was against a different team.
Yep, against GWS. Fascinating to see. You've got Brisbane Lions this week and the potential turn of Maeve Chaplin, who will take up a fair bit of that ball off halfback. So I think that those are the two that I trust the most. How do we feel about Gold Coast's Lappin and Usher?
Yeah, Lappin to high 40s, which is fine. I'm very happy with them sitting on the bench, but probably not playing on field. Ava Usher, who knows? I think similar to a lot of the other rookie options, I think there's going to be a fair bit of up and down there.
Yeah, I feel like Usher was scoring in like big bursts. It would be because I think they scored the first goal of the game. They got to 14 pretty quickly, and then I don't think they touched the ball until the third quarter. And then they were, massive scores sort of in that later half, but they all came in a flurry.
I think it might be the conditions there as well. I feel like Ava Usher is going to score when the game is messier, when there is more tackling, when there is less efficient ball movement, than Bound, who appears to be a little bit more condition insulated, kind of opponent insulated. She just looks like a very tidy footballer, someone I think will be a premium if and when she goes full-time inside midfielder. For the time being, I think that both Lappin is a very tidy footballer. I won't be shocked if after 6 to 8 weeks she becomes a 60 to 70 averaging player. At the moment, though, in a Gold Coast team that's very young, she has some great moments but does drift in and out of the game. I think that they're both more than... If you, in a pinch, had to field them, I think that that's okay. Preference to field them? No.
Yes. The Rucks, quite similar. We've pretty much got two very good rookie options, and if you didn't go with one of them, and like most people went with the Gold Coast rookie Rucks, you're probably a bit disappointed, but we've got two Rucks who are both averaging around 60, which is Jan Schenk from GWS and Maddie Quinn from Sydney. Any thoughts on those, Jono?
Yes. Yeah, I feel like they're both being pretty consistent. I don't think there's a world where we're playing rookie Rucks on field, so I guess for the purposes of this question, it's more hypothetical, but I think those two are by far the most reliable.
Very good. And going to the forward line, 3 question marks. Any thoughts here in the forward line who you want to play of those rookies? Jono, you can start us off on this one, given I threw the 3 question marks to Liam last time.
Yeah. I think the forward rookies have been some of the least consistent. There's two that I want to mention. The first is Lauren Young, who I think has been probably the most reliable. There are definitely opinions out there over whether or not she counts as a rookie, which is why I'm going to throw my second option out there that I think we haven't talked enough about, given how good they've been, and that is number one pick for Richmond, Olivia Walmarens.
Yes.
Her hands have been elite and is a big reason why the Richmond Tigers were actually able to score at all against the Bulldogs, because that was one of the most lopsided games I've ever seen in terms of just time in possession, but Richmond were able to be extremely efficient going forward.
I suspect she's going to start to get better defenders, however, because Katie Brennan's playing up the ground. She's playing on a wing.
Yeah.
And then it's, what's her name? Gab Seymour.
Well,
but I suspect now it's getting to a stage.
But also the G-Train.
I suspect it's Greiser who gets the best, and then it's probably Walmarens, who's shown enough now to start getting the second best. You're not kind of having it as a bit of a throwaway. You know that KB is going to play higher up the ground. I don't think they can play with four talls in their forward line. With the way that they're moving the ball at the moment, I just don't think that's sustainable. They're not efficient enough inside 50. They would get smashed when the ball hits the ground. But I think that anyone that started with Walmarens is ecstatic with how consistent she's been, and it's a miss from us to throw it away too quickly.
I think Gab Seymour becoming the third tall is music to Mel's ears. I guess the next questions we have will be, if you're trying to make as much money as possible from our rookies in the long term from this point, I guess who can we ride to the top, whether you've already got them or whether you're looking to bring them in because they've got money-making potential. I'm just going to throw this one out as a general, any line. Who are the rookies that you think are the ones that are going to be making the money from this point? And I'll start with you, Jono.
Yeah, this is tricky because it's kind of got that balance of there are players like Jordan Allen who are going to go up in cash for quite a while, but they're already over the 500k mark, or at least over the 450. Can't see their exact price right now, 533. So it's from this point forward, I think I'm probably looking more at players like a Lily Quigley, because if she can just get a few consistent games in a row, I think she's got a lot of money to make ahead of her. She could potentially, average, say, 60 from this point forward would make her a truck ton of cash. That's probably where my headspace is at right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, even with, the 33, you've got players like Patterson who have a bit of money to be made, but you're not going to be bringing them in probably at this point, especially with that suspension. I think it's going to be quite a challenge for the rookies. I think, Chloe Bown is one that we know is going to make a lot of money. You said Jordan Allen. I think that finding players that are going to continue to make money that haven't already made the money is going to be a bit of a struggle, which leads to the next question, which is, if you're trying to bring in cheap rookies right now, you've already mentioned a lot of these players are already above that 350k mark. Who are your best targets? And Liam, I want you to give me who you reckon you'd be bringing in if you were looking for a rookie at this point.
It's a tough spot to be looking. I'd say that Quigley with a break even of 8, which would be such an annoying situation for us to be in, given that she was, 200k last week and then made 77k, and we all brought in Ava Rusher or another rookie to make cash. Michaela Anthony looked excellent. I think it's also a bit outrageous that we've taken this long to mention Alana Welsh, who scored an 86 with 5 goals, looking exceptional. It was very impressive when Lucia Painter dominated round 1 last year and had that absolute bag, but it was against Gold Coast. I don't think that the West Coast key defenders are as bad as Gold Coast's were in round 1 last year, and Welsh took them to the cleaners. So not as expensive, made 150k, or made 142k last week, so that's a bit insane. But I think that's where I'm going. I'm looking just at the break-even game. Oh, another forward rookie that we've not mentioned, Nell Morris Dalton. That was a miss.
Yes.
101.
And I think that was a very interesting one, because only a 38 in the first week, which is probably fair grounds to have not gone into round 2 spruiking Nell Morris Dalton as an option, but looked really, really good. And it's rather unbelievable that Collingwood didn't think that she was worth holding on to on their list.
it's probably a learning from us that we can ponder over next offseason. It's an experienced player like that, particularly a key, coming in as an injury replacement player late, says you are likely to be on a very short track to playing in the best 21. Otherwise, they would bring in a 19, 20-year-old who's showing a little bit as an underager, maybe just missed out in a draft spot and is an up-and-coming rookie in the VFLW. Nell Morris-Dalton coming in late shouldn't have discounted it. She was already very cheap. We probably should have seen that she was likely to play and probably hold her role. She held in the side over Tara Bohana and Brooke Boylow last week. So that was another miss from us.
Very good. Jono, any last thoughts there?
Yeah, I think there's one other player. It's Claire Marnie, who's a little bit over that price, but I think having got a chance to watch her a bit more closely in that North Brisbane matchup, honestly, very, very clean, very composed. I think she's there to stay, to be honest. I thought she looked better than Tessa Boyd did at the similar time last year. So I think that role is going to be hers for the next few weeks at the very least.
I think that's very, very fair. Let's leave the rookies for now. It's such a difficult thing, and I'm sure we'll have so many more questions to ask next week once all of our rookies that we've spruiked have gone terribly, and all the ones that we thought were going terribly will do well. But the next section, we've got Liam's Captain's Corner. I think that the top players in the Captain's Corner are probably going to stay pretty much the same, but Liam, who have you got for this round?
So, I think that it's Ebony Marinoff 1, it's Lucy Wales at 2, Matilda Schultz at 3, Laura Gardner at 4, and then Jazz Garner or Ash Riddell at 5. I think if you look at the matchups that those two rucks have with 120 pluses on the weekend, so it's GWS for Matilda Schultz against Jan Sheck, and then it is a hapless Collingwood side at the moment who are leaking scores to rucks for Lucy Wales. I think that could be another 120 plus score.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating that we've got the rucks now genuinely featuring as captaincy options. And as you said, some very, very favourable matchups there, which is very good for those of us who did go for those big rucks. But yeah, Marinoff against West Coast it's hard to pass up, I will say that. Moving on, we now do have some listener questions, and I'll chuck these out to you two. The first one we've got from Neil T. Do we expect Richmond to change their midfield? All three are quite small. We've talked a bit about this. And if so, is Amelia Yasir the first out? I'll throw this one to you, Jono, because you did answer this a little bit before.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously struggling. The main issue that they've got is outside of the three we've talked about in Conti, Yasir, and Greaves. I mean, the next options in are Dana East and probably Ali Dalloway. The real issue is, and they're also quite small players. I actually don't think they've got the bigger players. They could run someone like an Izzy Bacon, who did run a tag sort of in that last quarter. But quite frankly, I just don't think she's going to get the job done. What they really need is Ellie McKenzie back. And that's a couple weeks away. I think they're going to persist with this for the next 2 weeks. And then Mackenzie, knowing she's not that far off on the horizon, is going to be the answer. So I don't expect massive changes this week. I don't think the Bombers is the same height in the midfield. It's definitely a lot of strength in the midfield, and will probably push them off the ball just the same. But I think they'll run it back with the main cast again.
I think that's very fair. And it sort of leads a little bit to our next question from Damo Dogs. What's your thoughts on the forward line top liners, as the rookies are very much associated with the bad teams, including the Tigers that we've just talked about? Liam, should we be looking to get these forward rookies out because they are in these poor teams and bringing in top liners for them, or should we be looking for value?
I still think that if all lines where you can afford to let it drop, given it's not so much like, yes, the forward line is bad, but the forward line is bad for most teams. So I would not be over trying to correct in a position where we've seen high fluctuation. We already know it's the highest fluctuation in scorers, even amongst the top line players. I wouldn't be overcorrecting and trying to complete your forward line too quickly. I think it's maybe try and consolidate and get one rookie off field. But I think that I see with the number of trades you have to do in defense, with Thomas, Gay, Cronin all potentially out. At least one, it's guaranteed to be out.
Patterson as well.
That's your first. I see that as a priority. Allow the forward line to stabilize. I think the other player we didn't talk about at all was Ash Richards, who was shocking. Had the worst role imaginable. Barely saw any midfield minutes until the third quarter. A lot of long bench stints. I think she finished with like 12 or 13 minutes on the bench in the fourth quarter. She's going to get very, very cheap. I can't see a world where they don't try and bring her back in if Nick Del Santo is serious about regaining the form from last year. I think we're going to get some players that will get cheap. Don't spend too much time trying to bring in what you see as top liners in the forward, where we're going to see that fluctuate massively.
Yeah, and I think a player who we haven't talked about is Mia Austin is probably the only rookie that you do need to get out of your team due to an ankle injury. But otherwise, players like Yasir playing a fairly fantasy-friendly Bombers team this week, probably not a major priority, especially because they are playing, which, as Liam has correctly pointed out, our backline is somewhere that there's going to have to be a bit of shifting. And just to follow up from what Damodog said, they also asked, with Gay most likely and now confirmed to be out, do we think it's better to go straight up to a Fish or a Tiny White, or go for a value pick in someone like Becky Webster or Jenna Richardson? Jono, which way would you prefer to go?
I think I would probably lean towards getting Zippy Fish if you don't have her. But I would also go Webster ahead of Tiny White. So at the moment, I'm actually looking at doing a bit of a restructure. I'm going to be getting in 2 defenders, and at the moment, it's going to be Fish and Webster jumping into my team.
I love that for you. I'm also looking to bring in Zippy Fish, but I also already have Tiny White and Becky Webster, so that's why Zippy Fish is the option for me. Moving on to Braddle's Fantasy. Hey, us leg ends, do we think this is just the Healy Serene crap score? We have talked about that, and she'll kill it from here. Asking for a friend that may have accidentally picked her in round 1, and more importantly, Sarah Verrier, that is it. We've talked about this before, but Liam, you love St Kilda. Serene crap score, is this a one-off?
I have to think so. It feels like the type of game where in the past, with Serene's poor scoring, there is an immediate correction because the bad scoring comes in bad games for the Saints. I actually think she's a target this week. And for me, if I want to upgrade to Ash Riddell or Laura Gardner from Belle Dawes, who I will put my hand up and say was a mistake, I can do that by Gay down to Serene Watson, given Serene's price starts with a 6. So it's very difficult for any owner to trade her out to get any value. I think you do have to hold, but I almost think she's a target. And kind of forego the stabilization of the BE and just use it as a launching point for an Uber premium in the midfield.
An interesting option there. And the Uber premium in the midfield is another question we have from Damo Dogs, who's been asking us a lot of rippers. Gardner's seeming to get close to match fitness. We talked about this before. Is now the time to be trying to get up to a Gardner from someone like a Roberts or a Woodland or another one of your midfielders who is not necessarily a premium? Or is that maybe a wait for another week given the injury carnage in the back line? What do you reckon, Jono?
Yeah, I think at this point, I'm backing in Woodland and Roberts to bounce back. It is a great time to get Gardner, but I just think that these are your premiums. We've got confidence in them generally. I think they at least deserve one more week to just show what they can do. And I imagine most teams, maybe not the Dambo Dogs, maybe they're crushing it right now, but most teams probably have bigger issues going on, would be my thoughts.
Yeah, I think the thing about Laura Gardner for me is that normally I would say, having come from such a high price to begin with, I'd say, oh, look, I reckon there's a bit more price to drop. But who is Sydney playing this week, Liam?
I wonder who that could be.
They are playing St Kilda, who have proven to be a very, very midfield-friendly team. I do wonder if this is a week where Laura Gardner could just put on a blitz and start going back up in price. So it's an interesting question, but like a lot of coaches for me, I have a lot of other areas that require my attention first, as much as I would love to bring in Laura Gardner. The last one that we will talk about is from Ethan, and it's talking about those mid to low price defender options. Who is the biggest trade priority out of Daisy Darcy and Chantal Emonson? They've also thrown in Violet Patterson, but I think that's slightly different due to that suspension. So I'm going to go between Darcy and Emonson, and I believe you own both of them, Liam. So who would you say is more priority?
This is a really good question because I love the fact that I had an easy out before. I could just be like, oh, it's obviously Violet Patterson because she's out. So Gold Coast.
I'd avoid that.
So Gold Coast have in the next few games Geelong, Port Adelaide, Collingwood. So one really good matchup and one difficult and one neutral versus Emonson, who we didn't really discuss it too much. Her score build was truly insane, scoring like 90% of her score in the fourth quarter, but it also spoke to the fact that that was when Geelong were trying to control the ball a little bit more, could really pad their stats. I think there's a case to be made that it is Emonson because I just don't know if she's going to have the ceiling this year. And I think I've seen enough from Darcy. But it is very close, and I'm not confident in either of them at the moment. And both would be higher trade priorities if we didn't have the volume of injuries in defence, or at least concerns.
Very much so. I think we will leave it there for the questions and start talking about our trade plans going forward. Jono, we've talked about it so much, but your number one trade prior, I'm going to guess, is sorting out your defence.
It is, yeah. I think having Patterson back there and also having to cop Zoe Wackfer on field with that Charlie Thomas laid out, I'm definitely look to get a bit more support back there. So I'll be trading out of Maddie Gay and Ailey Runnels in my midfield and moving that money into the backline, picking up Zippy Fish and Becky Webster, which will also allow me to kind of grab a better rookie on the other end. So I won't have to be trading into any of these defensive rookies that I do not trust. So I think that is going to allow me to grab Lily Quigley straight back into my team after trading her out last week.
The omission of Charlotte Brewer actually saved me from trading out Lily Quigley because I thought, you know what, I may as well keep her because she might do well, and she did. So that was quite fortunate. Liam, I'm guessing you are also along the lines of what to do with Maddie Gay.
Yes, so at the moment it's Maddie Gay down to Serene Watson, Violet Patterson goes out, and then to whom will depend on who my premium upgrade is from Beldors. At the moment, with zero cash, I can get up to Ash Riddell with Nat Entwistle, which I don't love. That's just a trade I'm just going to sit there with for now. I may try and find a way to make a slightly better option, given Entwistle had 2 disposals on the weekend and scored a 23, which, is good, and the break-even's only 20, but it's not what I'm confident in. But, yeah, look, I'm trying to target an Uber Premium, given that I've already got Zippy Fish. I don't need to make the correction trade there. I can try and find a way to... and I held Lucy Cronin with the 1-weeker, held on to Charlie Thomas with the 1-weeker, or ideally it's a 1-weeker for both of them. So I do have the ability to field no rookies in defence, meaning I'm going to be hunting for an Uber or at least a high premium upgrade in my midfield.
Very nice. I am also looking to trade out Maddie Gay, and Zippy Fish is the order of the day. I've also got Mia Austin who needs to go out, so I'm going to have to continue fielding 2 backline rookies, although part of that is because I've decided to try and capitalize on Anya McDonough's very soft matchup this week and hope, much like Jono, that the Richmond forwards in particular, Greaves and Yasir, can hold me through for one more week, and then we'll see what we can do next week with our forward/defensive lower half of our teams, but overall not doing too bad. Any final thoughts from you two before we wrap up?
No, just I would like to see the ranking improved. I was content with last week, but wasn't very happy. This last week, I would have been a lot sadder and a lot more disappointed if it wasn't for the fact that I was worrying about other fantasy sports over the weekend. I need to see that number start to rise. I want to see the ship start to move more positively in my direction.
Yeah, I think for me, the big thing this week, we've already got so many forced out across our sides. I am just praying for no more surprises. I think if we could just get through the rest of the week clean and neat, that would be a happy week for me.
I completely agree, and I think Lucy Cronin and Charlie Thomas just coming back in and doing their thing would be a very nice way for that to happen. We might wrap it up there, so thank you so much for listening. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, either on the Free Kick or official AFLW Fantasy Podcast streams. We also have the Free Kick W Pod on YouTube and on the socials, Twitter and Instagram. We also have our article that will come out on Wednesday with your buy-sell options, which will go through a fair bit of what we've said, thanks to the wonderful Jono and Liam. And you can also join the Listener Fantasy League for Free Kick. It is not too late. You can still join and see where your rank goes compared to all the other listeners. We do have a code, and I'm going to get Liam to read this one out because he loves to do it.
RSG4QUJL.
Wonderful. Hopefully you remembered that. Please write it down. Please go fill it in and join our league. Otherwise, we have been Free Kick, and thank you so much for listening. Good luck for the round ahead, and hopefully it is a much more simple one for our rookies and defenders, but I guess we will see. Thank you, and see you next time.
See you, everyone.
Bye.